So hi, Alistair. Thank you for having me. And hi, everyone. I'm Rachel So from the Agency of Science, Technology and Research, or A-STAR in Singapore. Today, I'll present the findings of a diet modeling study from a publication of my co-author, Professor Kieran Ford. It's called Unintended Consequences, Nutritional Impact and Potential Pitfalls of Switching from Animal to Plant-Based Foods. The demand for alternative proteins has been growing very rapidly. Sales of plant-based meats around the world are expected to double from about $4 billion in 2020 to $8 billion in 2025. And there are many reasons for this. We've done some previous work looking into popular marketing claims, including those made by food producers. When producers promote alternative proteins to consumers, they say that these products, especially the new plant-based meats, are healthier, more appealing to the senses, better for the environment, and kinder to animals. At the same time, producers try to alleviate concerns about safety of these new food products, many of which are created in a lab. The price of plant-based meat tends to be higher as well compared to animal meat. So producers try to upsell these products as being more premium. Our past research was published in a review in early 2021, and we found a few main things. Firstly, many of the claims I just mentioned are not based on good evidence. And secondly, the majority of consumers value health above the other reasons when they choose to switch their protein source. And finally, further research is needed into the impact on health when people switch to alternative proteins, especially newer ones on the market. So there's a research gap in this area on health impact. We therefore decided to do a deep dive into the health aspect with a focus on plant-based meats, such as burgers and sausages, since these are now mainstream and a large part of the rise in plant-based diets. We wanted to find out how novel plant-based foods, such as the popular fast food formats, compare nutritionally with traditional plant-based foods, as well as the potential health implications of adopting novel plant-based foods. To answer these questions, we modeled the outcome of replacing beef, chicken, and other animal products with animal-free versions. First, we created a reference diet based on the average intake of adults in the US. This was based off a large population survey called the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, or NHANES, conducted from 2017 to 2018. It included foods from a typical Western diet with meat, vegetables, dairy, and dairy products. And here it is in picture form with 3 meals and 3 snacks. This reference diet meets US dietary guidelines for a number of nutrients. However, it exceeds guidelines for calories, macronutrients, as well as saturated fat, sodium, and sugar. It also does not meet dietary guidelines for fiber, potassium, nor magnesium. So we see that there is room for improvement for the average US consumer's diet. This diet, however, represents the majority of US consumers and what their typical intake might look like as a realistic starting point for our study. Using this, we sought to model how an average consumer might be affected by substituting items in their diet for plant-based ones. I'll now describe the different diets we used in this study. As mentioned, the reference diet included meat, vegetables, dairy, and dairy products. We then substituted animal products in this reference diet to create flexitarian, vegetarian, and vegan diets. We created 2 versions of each diet, one with traditional plant-based foods like beans and tofu, and one with novel plant-based meats and dairy alternatives. The flexitarian diets had more vegetables, beans, and soy, and less meat, but still had dairy. The novel flexitarian diet began to include plant-based beef and chicken, as represented by the burger, as well as dairy alternatives like coconut yogurt and ice cream. The vegetarian diets had no meat, but still had dairy and more vegetables, beans, and soy. And the novel vegetarian diet had plant-based meat and dairy alternatives, more so than the flexitarian diets. And finally, the vegan diets on the right had no meat or dairy at all, only plant sources. And the novel vegan diet had the most plant-based meat and dairy alternatives. I will now share the main results by comparing the traditional plant-based diets, followed by the novel plant-based diets, then the vegan diets. You'll be seeing a number of graphs which look like the one on the right. Each graph shows the levels in each diet of a particular nutrient. So here we have calcium, and we can see how much calcium is in each of the diets from the reference diet to a vegan novel diet. Each vertical bar represents a different diet, and the orange dotted line throughout is the recommended daily amount for that nutrient. So if a bar is higher than the orange dotted line, it means that diet has met the recommended daily amount for that nutrient. If it falls below, it's insufficient. So we see here that the reference diet, flexitarian traditional, and vegetarian traditional diets contain enough calcium to meet the daily nutritional goal. But a flexitarian novel, vegetarian novel, and both vegan diets do not. Starting with the traditional plant-based diets, which replaced meat with plant proteins like beans, nuts, and soy, these met the daily requirements for all 7 micronutrients that we studied, as can be seen here. However, this applied only to the flexitarian and vegetarian traditional diets, not the vegan diet. So in summary, the traditional plant protein versions of flexitarian and vegetarian diets, not the vegan diet, met the daily targets for these 7 micronutrients. Not only this, but these 2 diets were lower in saturated fat, sodium, and sugar compared to the original reference diet. So they're healthier options if someone wanted to go plant-based. Next, we'll look at the novel plant-based diets. So these are the flexitarian, vegetarian, and vegan diets, which replaced meat and dairy with novel plant-based foods like burgers, chicken, and sausages, as well as dairy alternatives. And now all these diets were found to be inadequate for most of the micronutrients, as you can see here, for calcium, potassium, magnesium, zinc, and vitamin B12. They are also higher than the reference diet in saturated fat, sodium, and sugar. So having more of these novel plant-based meats doesn't mean a more nutritious diet. And looking at the vegan diets in particular, they were the lowest overall in calcium and highest in sugar since they contain no dairy and use dairy alternatives such as soy milk, coconut spreads, and dairy-free cheese. The vegan diet with novel plant-based sources not only had the highest overall sodium, so it had the most salt, but was lowest overall for 6 out of the 7 micronutrients that we looked at. Now take note, we did not use fortified foods or supplements, and this was to reduce variability and enable an equal comparison across diets. So this really emphasizes the need for vegans to consume fortified foods and supplements such as calcium and B12 to reach their daily requirements. Now the strengths of this study were the modeling of 7 diets, omnivore to vegan, with 3 meals and 3 snacks a day in a practical manner that follows current nutrient intakes to represent the average consumer. Diets were matched for calories, carbohydrate, protein, and fat in order to observe changes in micronutrient intakes. The study also had its limitations. Results were modeled over the course of 1 day, so cannot fully represent a complete diet of a person. Also, as mentioned, we did not include fortified products or supplements in order to create an equivalent comparison across diets. So the case study doesn't fully represent a diet of a plant-based consumer who has these items regularly. And finally, as this study was done on the US population, the results cannot be extrapolated to other populations. To conclude, even though our comparisons were over the course of a day, they shed some light on potential health risks of adopting novel plant-based diets over the long term. So these include greater risk of micronutrient deficiencies, low bone mineral density, osteoporosis, and fractures, as well as obesity, diabetes, and poor heart health. Our case study highlights the ease of unintentionally increasing undesired nutrients and reducing overall diet quality when replacing meat with unhealthy plant-based substitutes. Also, consumers need support and guidance to ensure they select nutritious alternatives. For instance, more focus can be made on promoting and increasing the availability of fresh vegetables, beans, and tofu, instead of novel plant-based burgers, which are not necessarily healthier. Now, this is not to say we cannot have novel plant-based foods. Having them in moderation is fine, but they're not currently recommended as a complete animal protein replacement. And finally, as the plant-based market grows and technology progresses, there's much potential to develop nutritious plant-based foods. And indeed, this is what we're doing here at A-STAR in the Singapore Institute of Food and Biotechnology Innovation, where we use science and technology to create nutritious plant foods as well as study the impact of food structure on health. And given our location in Asia and our multi-ethnic population, we focus especially on Asian consumers. So as some quick examples, Dr. Jiahong Chiang's team has come up with 2 versions of plant-based frozen desserts. So one version is made of chickpea protein, another version is made of chickpea protein and soy milk powder. It has 6% protein as compared to 1 to 3% in commercial brands. And it's also higher in fiber compared to current options. Dr. Sean Sim's team has created a number of plant-based yogurts using peas, lentils, fava beans, chickpeas, or mung beans. So the mung bean yogurt you can see here has 12% protein, which is higher than dairy options that have about 10%. And the team also managed to overcome textural issues, which are quite common actually to plant-based yogurts, which are usually quite lumpy and quite goopy. They managed to create a smooth texture comparable to that of dairy yogurts. And they use technology which reduces processing time from hours to just 5 minutes. And Mr. Melvin Ko's team worked with Nutrient to create a low GI oat cookie, which includes plant-based functional ingredients. It's higher in protein and fiber than commercially available cookies and can help manage risks of chronic conditions like diabetes. So I've come to the end of the presentation. Thank you for your attention. And a big thank you to my co-author, Professor Kieran Ford, as well as to my team in A-STAR in Singapore. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
You mentioned that plant-based meat alternatives have seen strong growth in sales, and they should, in theory, help us to reduce certain risks associated with a meat-based diet, particularly cardiovascular disease or type 2 diabetes. So the intentions are good, and we want to offer people alternatives in their transition to a more plant-based diet. For the food producers, in your view, what do they need to prioritize next to improve their products?
So I think that plant-based meat producers can perhaps turn some of their focus towards innovating foods which are more nutritious, rich in micronutrients, and not in fast food formats. Previously, there's been a lot of focus on laying the groundwork for producing plant-based meats and increasing their availability. And many startups have been founded recently, with most trying to imitate the look, taste, and cooking properties of meat in order to appeal to meat eaters and aspiring flexitarians. However, the nutritional content of these products seem to have taken a back seat in the rush to get these products out and make them appealing. And perhaps as well, some of the focus has been taken off the current nutritious options that we already have, like legumes, nuts, and soy products like tofu. So yes, we can have some meat-like options which are more nutritious, but I also wonder if the focus could be more on increasing availability of healthy plant foods, making them more appealing rather than more meat-like options, many of which are in fast food formats and may not enhance health like consumers would expect. And this, of course, it won't be the work of plant-based meat producers alone, but likely also requires action at the public health and government level.
So Rachel, if we consider food sustainability and obviously the future of food, then plant-based meat alternatives are very interesting, but what are the 3 biggest challenges maybe for us still to solve?
So this is a very big and important question. I'll do my best to answer it. So I think 3 of the biggest challenges for the future of food are sustainability, as you said, nutrition, and accessibility. The last aspect being more of a public policy, government level. So I think our ideal future of food includes quite a few aspects. So food must be tasty, it must be appealing, healthy, affordable, and readily available to us, and also perhaps even more personalized to the consumer. So first, sustainability. So there are concerns that the current rate of food production, it cannot keep up with the world's population growth, which is growing very rapidly and predicted to exceed 9 billion by 2050. And as the population grows and more places become developed and urbanized, consumers will demand more meat if current trends continue, which will cause an even bigger strain on current resources. So we need to find or create more sustainable options to support that sustainability aspect of our future food system. And this is what we're trying to do as a nation in Singapore, and SIFB and A-STAR, we're doing our best to support that with our research. And secondly, the nutrition aspect. As our study showed, it's possible that as producers attempt to address concerns such as sustainability, they may create foods which are inferior to current protein options in terms of nutrition. And as consumers become more educated, more health conscious, they might be drawn towards these new plant-based meats. So it's going to take some time for producers to create appealing options, which are, to tick all the boxes. They're sustainable, better for the earth, and also nutritious. So we're currently in that period of transition in order to tick all those boxes. So helping consumers choose truly nutritious options amidst the hype is another challenge. And the last thing I'll say on nutrition is that everyone has different nutritional needs. And as more people live longer, not only must everyone be fed sufficiently, but these nutritional needs must be met, especially for groups like the elderly, pregnant women, infants, children, those with medical conditions. So this will be another significant challenge. And the last challenge, in my opinion, is accessibility. So having access to affordable and nutritious food is still a major problem in many parts of the world. World hunger has been steadily declining, but recently, and in part due to COVID-19, hunger is again on the rise, affecting nearly 10% of people around the world. Even in developed nations, food deserts are present where there's limited access to affordable and nutritious food, especially fresh fruits and vegetables. And cost may not be the only issue here regarding accessibility. It's having the infrastructure to get affordable and nutritious food to more people. And the reality is, for many, it's not about choosing between cultured meat or plant-based sausages. It's about being able to afford healthy food, which is near to where they live and work. And much has been done in this area, but there's still quite a long way to go in providing a range of affordable, accessible, and nutritious protein options to consumers. So in my opinion, and our previous work, the current study, and the general literature supports this, if more populations go plant-based towards more traditional plant foods, this will be more sustainable, as well as be better for health. So we can all do our part by having a little less meat and more vegetables.
Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time today. Let me wish you and the group at A-STAR all the very best for your further research. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.